Today in the ExploreVM podcast, we've got a special episode in a series I'm calling ExploreVM Live. The following session was recorded at a company meeting where I was giving a VMware 101 lesson for our engineers who work outside of data center technologies. It's a high-level overview, but we do have some laughs. I hope you enjoy.
Myself from outside of the office. I'm on Twitter at ExploreVM. I know a few others in this room are as well. If you're not, you probably should. As a technologist, it's a great place to find information, network with others, get some help when you're doing some jams. I also blog at ExploreVM.com and run the ExploreVM podcast. You can find that on iTunes. You can find that on Google Play, iHeartRadio, Player FM. Pretty much wherever podcasts are located. Some of the more nerdy stuff outside of work. Last summer I competed in a contest called Virtual Design Master, Season 4. You're given a scenario, and you have less than a week to design a solution, submit it for judging, submit the documents for judging, and then defend it live over a broadcast. I took third place out of 14 international competitors, so I'm so proud I pulled that one off. My whole goal was to not go out first, and I succeeded in that. Coming up in September, I'll be taking part in Tech Field Day. This is something that Adam just did back in March. We went to Storage Field Day. It's where independent bloggers and community members can go and meet with some high-ranking engineers, high-ranking people from various companies. I'll be getting a lot of good information out of that and then bring it back to share internally with the company, as well as tweeting and blogging about that as well.
Yeah, it's really pretty prestigious to be invited to be on the blogger panel for Tech Field Day event. I think maybe me might be going first or second or third people that received would ever be invited to be part of the event. So it's a pretty widely watched in our industry from an online perspective. Cool that all good.
And then also the invite came with a recommendation. I wasn't told whom, but I've got a really good idea of who recommended me as well. I was also told to buy whoever I thought it was a beer, so that's probably going to happen as well. I've also, I think this number is a little low. I've spoken at 8 different VMUG events across 3 different states, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. Looking to do more outside of that area as well. And right this morning I got an email. VMUG wants me to speak in Indy, so we'll talk about that.
As long as Dean puts you up in his house if you do well.
Well, I mean, they pay for me, but as long as he wants to, I'm fine with that. And then coming up next week, Thursday, I'll be speaking at, Wednesday, that's very important to know. I'll be speaking at the Canvas conference. So that'll be kind of cool. That's the biggest thing I'll have spoken at this point then. So let's dive right in. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk a little bit high level of what is vSphere, the overarching product suite. Going to touch on a couple of topics in depth. That would be snapshots, and that's going to be troubleshooting, and there's some Q&A in there. Some of this is kind of high level. We are talking about doing more deep dives in the future, specifically host upgrades. I know a lot of the voice folks do that with their technologies. And we're also talking about doing a vSphere networking deep dive. So what does it do inside the hosts, and how does it touch out to the other, like the physical network? But that's the future. So here's a quick overview of the product suite. vSphere, again, is everything. ESXi is your hypervisor. That's what runs on your hosts. You have the vSphere client, which is the one you can put on your Windows, or, sorry everybody, the web client, and that is not going away. So if you use the web client and you hate it, you're going to have to learn to love it, because after 6.5, they're doing away with the fact client, the Windows client. So it's all going to be through the web. It's getting better. I seem to still be in the minority on this. I think it's doing better than what it was, but it's coming around. vCenter Server, that gives you your centralized manage of everything. virtualized storage offering. So what VMware wants you to do is couple NSX and vSAN and attack the hyperconverged market. AirWatch, that's mobile device management, and you can do that with not only like phones, but also with tablets and laptops. Gives great functionality and control remotely. You can push out applications. You can track where these devices are. The product is really coming along. It's coming up. It's come quite a bit since VMware bought it a few years ago. What else we got? Horizon is the VDI solution, so the virtualized desktop. That's not one I've touched, but I know we have plenty of clients around all of Presidio that use it. And the vRealize suite. Some of this we use, some of this we don't. The big ones to know are Log Insight and Operations Manager. Operations Manager is what we use when we do the VMware health assessments or the VOAs. And then Log Insight I'll talk about a little bit later with how we can use it with clients. So what is ESXi? It's clearly, it's magic. But before we begin, a little trivia. What does ESX stand for? Jason had his hand up first.
You geek.
Elastic Sky X. It's purely marketing.
That goes back to that old magic
Elastic
video
Sky
a moment ago.
X. Elastic Sky X. And ESXi is Elastic Sky X integrated. It's just so Craig's not in the room. He was supposed to have given me 3 gift cards. He only gave me 1 today. I have 2 more questions. So as we answer those questions, you pick one. Well, you can harass Craig for the gift cards. We'll just make sure he pays up. All right. So ESXi is a Type 1 hypervisor. It runs on the bare metal hardware. It is also known as a microkernel. So the VM kernel is the root of ESXi. It offers just enough functionality to sit between the physical hardware and your guest operating system. So it's just enough to pass it through so it can run on top of it. The VM kernel handles your compute and your memory functions. And then when you want to go to stuff like attached networking or pass-through devices, that is handled through the VMK. Where did it go? Yeah, the VM. No, not quite VM kernel.
VMK Linux.
There it is. VMK Linux module.
Paul, you say this is a Type 1 hypervisor. What other types are there?
Type 2.
Oh, it does. So that would be like a VMware workstation. Okay.
Yeah, spot on.
Type 2 runs that Windows, Type 3 runs it.
So some very common tasks. Again, this is going to be some high-level stuff. Very common tasks in vCenter. You're going to do your vMotions. That's moving VMs from host to host, keeping them online, moving them host to host. Storage vMotion, where you move the storage behind those VMs to a different location. When you clone a VM, you can make an exact copy, or you can make a copy. It's called a linked clone, where they share some of those same VMDK files. I've never really had use for linked clones. And then snapshots, which we're going to talk about momentarily. All of that is requires vCenter Server. A lot of the heavier, like the higher end licensed stuff requires vCenter Server, which realistically nearly all of our clients have. I've spoken to one, and it's really not so much a client as they want some ideas of what to do.
We run into a lot of our voice customers that have standalone ESX hosts.
Yeah.
So that's pretty common.
Yeah.
Voice guys in the room, is that pretty common?
Yeah.
Some of the stuff you can do without vCenter Server, you can create your VM, edit the settings, you can do your start and your stop, you can browse the storage, you can browse the data store, you can create your virtualized networking. I've got a little note there, edit VM settings, CPU and RAM can be done as a hot add if it's set up properly when the VM is created. Just a little nugget there.
What do you have to do to set that up properly?
So in the VM settings, it's like the second or third tab. I don't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head. There'll be a box that you have to check for hot add.
Okay.
What's that?
The OS must also support it.
Yes, the operating system must also support it.
Windows Data Center, Windows Server Data Center.
Oh, okay.
because this is not going to be good for your environment. I've heard people say, well, you can support 32, blah, blah. No, get it out of here. This is trash.
Yeah, just
I will die on this
VMware
hill,
snapshots are terrible.
and we will get there. Oh, yeah. That's why silent. They're there. People forget about them.
So if you see that, send an email.
Yeah.
Call.
Yeah. Don't try anything if you see this. Get myself involved, Jason, Adam, somebody please.
Log out and tell me you're over there.
All right. So snapshots, they are a point-in-time preservation of a VM's data and state. What's the data? It's those files that make up the VM. And then the state is obviously on or off, powered on or off. What snapshots are not? They are not backups. First and foremost, snapshots are not backups. Second of all, snapshots are not backups. And finally, say it with me, snapshots are not backups. Please, if you hear somebody saying, well, we use this for backups, no, it's not. Again,
Type 2 backup.
I was going to ask the same thing.
let's drive that home. They need another solution. So this is kind of an eye chart on this TV. So how snapshots work. Your vCenter server makes an API call to the host that houses the VM. The host then in turn starts to make a copy of those VM files.
You don't have to have a vCenter server to make snapshots, do you? You can just do it to the client standalone, right?
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's how you back up when you don't have
Yeah.
Right, that's how your team is back up.
Yeah, that's how we back up voice servers all the time.
Except you guys data to make them valid, right?
We like to rebuild things, so we just do SFTP.
Are those technically not backups?
Type 2 backups.
So once the vCenter makes the call to the host starts the copy process of those VM files. If you look in here, there is the quiescing option. So if you've got that set up, it's going to stop processes and it's going to stop everything like processing for momentarily, take that snapshot, and then release it to keep going. It's then going to start a snapshot database, a VM SD file, and then the host calls the function. Oh my gosh, I forgot how this all went.
Just click. It just
Click.
happens.
So then it's got the copy of the files, and it creates a child disk. A child disk is a sparse disk, and it's copy on write. So what that means is as the VM starts to do its I/O and it starts to do things, it's going to then copy that to the child disk and then down to your parent disk. This can deeply impact performance, and it can impact your storage. Your VM also runs on that child disk. So when you create a snapshot, here's your original VM way at the bottom. You create your first snapshot, and then this one obviously has 3 total. Everything processes straight down through that tiered snapshot structure. So that's why those images we just looked at on the start of the snapshot section is a terrible, terrible idea. So it's got to write everything down and through, so you're taking up excess space and you're taking up extra processing time. Okay, so then how do you handle this? You've got the snapshot manager. So you got delete, go to, or consolidate your snapshots. This should look pretty familiar, again, if we're doing your snapshots with voice servers, etc. Excuse me. And I added this morning, so I'm not as rehearsed. So we'll. When you delete the snapshot, it will take the child disk and push it down, or it's not pushed it down, but it'll combine the disks. So if you've got multiple snapshots, it's going to combine it and then merge it all into your main disk. If you delete all, it's going to do that in a sequence. If anyone wants to chime in if I'm getting this wrong, again, I didn't rehearse this nearly
So in his case, would it be better to use the free Veeam tool and then just get a Veeam backup of it instead? Because that is a backup, right?
I would advocate for that. I would advocate for doing something like an actual backup.
Well, it just goes against what you said.
Because that's
about
just
leaving
being held right in the same data store.
Yeah.
So if something happens to that data store, you've got a snapshot, but where's it going to go?
Well, even
We have multiple backups on it.
yeah.
We have other backups on my team, but
Even though they configure, I was just going to say, even though the server doesn't actually change, what's the operating system doing under the covers? Isn't it still ballooning out that snapshot the whole time, probably?
Yeah, whatever it's processing, or if it's downloading Windows updates or something, whatever it's doing.
Linux doesn't download.
Linux.
Sure, but it probably writes log files or something with that, right?
There's something. There's always going to be something. It doesn't say completely. So here's the delete all, and this is what we were talking about when you get many snapshots stacked up. So it's going back to that first example where we had the 3 snapshots. They compound, or they copy to each snapshot as they move forward. So all of a sudden, your 20 gig snapshot, when it's the first snapshot, will end up being 60 gigs at the end, and you can fill up a data store when you're trying to delete them, and that's going to hurt a lot of things. So revert or go to, going back to your snapshot manager, revert will take you back to just the previous snapshots. If you've got a few, it'll take you to the most recent snapshot. Go to, you select a specific snapshot and then go there. And then it's going to remove the snapshots below. And this is the problem that the client had that I was just speaking about. They're called phantom snapshots. These can be troublesome because they don't show up in your snapshot manager. You can find them in your data stores in the VM folder. You can see rogue VMDK files or rogue delta.vmdks. Typically, a snapshot's going to look like 0.0000001.vmdk or 0.0000002, etc., depending on how many snapshots you've taken. If you see that out there, but you don't see anything in your snapshot manager, run what's known, it's called a helper snapshot. Just run a snapshot, delete all. If that doesn't work, they're still in there, escalate it to someone like myself or one of the other data center folks. We can take care of that. Because then you have to manually go in there and remove those files. You don't want to remove the wrong one because then you've taken away their VMDK or you've caused a problem.
Do you know how something is broken like that? What causes it?
I don't know. Jason or Adam? No, it just kind of happens, right? Like bugs. So snapshot best practices. Do not use snapshots as backups. Drive that home. Delete snapshots. Snapshots ASAP, no longer than 3 days, 24 hours, right in there. That's what VMware says. That's what I've adhered to. Only chain 2 to 3 together. That's best practices. I believe the number is 32 or 33 that can be chained, but that seems like a terrible idea for many reasons. And then clear snapshots before increasing the virtual machine disk size. So you can expand your C drive, but if it's got a snapshot, you bring it from 100 gigs to 200 gigs, that snapshot's going to freak out because it's going to say, well, where's all this data go now that I'm 200 gigs? If it doesn't line up, it can cause some problems. All right, snapshot trivia. Craig, I might have told them to talk to you for
Free lunch.
gift cards.
Free beer.
I told Paul I gave him gift cards.
3 days.
3 days. Maximum recommended time before deleting a snapshot, 3 days or 72 hours.
One day.
One day.
Better says one day.
All right, some basic troubleshooting. Obviously, we just want to start everything and call it a day.
Format and see.
Clearly, step 1 is blame the network and walk away, right? It's always the network's fault.
Firewall.
It's always the network's
Firewall.
fault.
It's always the firewall.
No, we don't all agree that it's the network's fault. It's okay.
Next presentation.
Gotta take my barbs when I go. All right, so first things first, your host and your vCenter is going to show you some alarms. So if there's something going on, real easy graphical way to see this. I'm pretty sure we've all seen this at this point. There's 33 pre-configured triggerable alarms in vCenter that'll tell you stuff like this data store is getting full, or there's high CPU. expand out there. So there's your vCenter at the top is your vCenter.
Yep.
Then the little building is your data center.
Yep.
What you don't see here is like a list of VMs.
Yeah.
And your VM will also have the little orange or red box highlighted there.
Okay.
And if it's that, you can also check the summary page of the VM itself.
Okay.
And that's where it'll show you. I'm actually surprised you're not able to punch down in here.
Could be right in the arm.
Yeah, it should be in the alarm.
Okay.
So that's the very first place to start. Just take a look, see if there's anything kicked up. Another thing to look at, if you suspect hardware issues going on within the host, you can find that through the web client with 6.0 and later. It's just been moved entirely to the web client. So you go host, monitor, hardware status. It's the same. It's almost the same as looking at, say, the ILO or the iDRAC or the out-of-band management for the hosts. This is pretty reliable. It's not always the case. Same thing with the out-of-band management. I've had clients, they were having issues. The host 3, they would go to log into it, or they just connect to it through vCenter, take forever. Same thing if they launched the FAT client, try to log in, would take forever. 90 seconds, and then the inventory and everything would load. Host is up, VMs are running, no performance issues. And everything looked fine in here, no alarms. We dove through the logs and found out that the host is dual boot, boot from SD card. There's mirrored SD cards. One of those cards failed. We found that in the logs, but no hardware errors were kicked off. So we took the log information, he opened a ticket with Dell, got a new SD card, and actually got the mounts for the SD card replaced. So yes, this is pretty good, but sometimes you might have to dive further, especially if things aren't making sense. Okay, so virtual machine and host performance issues. So typically, if a VM is performing poorly or it won't boot, your data store is full, or your host just doesn't have enough resources to run. You can also check and make sure that the storage is still attached to the host. Is the storage that this VM is running on, are there multiple paths? Is there a path down? And of course, check the networking. What's going on between where you're at and that VM? Is there something going on? Host performance issues. Typically, what I see most common is the host is performing poorly because it's overloaded. There are a lot of VMs. There's just not enough CPU. We've got a couple of CPU hogs, RAM hogs. Best way to handle that is to get stuff off of that host. Which, if you can't, and I've had this happen, if they don't have space elsewhere, see if there's VMs you can shut down or address the ones that are really sucking up the resources. There are ways without vCenter to migrate. It does involve things being shut off. It's a little bit more tricky than just right-click vMotion. But try to free up as much space as you can on the host. If there's something deeper going on, obviously you can reach out to myself and we can look at it further. Do we have everything covered on here?
Paul, I want to touch on one thing up there on the networking portion. A lot of people don't realize that in virtual environments, the same tenets of networking apply as a physical infrastructure. You can't ping your virtual machine to make sure it's on the right VLAN, that the switch has the VLAN, the virtual switch has the VLAN number identified, that if it's a trunk interface, that you can actually trunk that VLAN physically to the host. So same thing that we would troubleshoot a physical endpoint and not being able to reach the network. So keep that in mind. I see that as a common issue out there. A lot of times, hey, I can't get to my VM. What's the deal? Follow the networking back, just like you would in physical infrastructure.
Yeah, and if you make changes to the VNIC, it's going to lose, like if you change the driver or something, if you change the style of VNIC, it is going to lose its network configuration. So it'll have a NIC, but you have to go actually into it, reprogram your IP and everything else.
One common thing I run into is that if you actually rename the network, the vNetwork, that it doesn't stay linked to the virtual machines anymore.
Go ahead and drop down.
Yeah, find the actual network that you changed.
Yep.
Yep.
Fix that.
Okay, so, the other thing on here was, a lot of times another thing we see is the host will drop off from the vCenter server where you can't log into it using the FAT client. This is where you're going to need to restart the management agents. I say this, and I'm going to qualify it. When you restart the management agents, typically it does not affect VMs running or performance. It can temporarily pause stuff, but you should do it. You should be able to do it right now if you had to do it during is the direct console user interface. So when you actually have physical access to the host with KVM or remotely through like automated management, this is what you see. F2 to log in, roots, your password. So we can pull some support information. And then you can also go into your troubleshooting, because nobody can actually see the laser on here. The troubleshooting options and enable, disable SSH, because you're going to need that to remote in. And then you can restart your management agents from here. I've had it where trying to restart it from here just doesn't happen because the host is so lagged and so bogged down. We had to do it through SSH. So again, you launch your SSH console, you point to the management IP of the host, log in as root. This is what you're going to see. And those are the two commands you're going to want to run to restart the management agents. Again, should not impact running VMs. Could always be a hiccup. And then here's another command. There's a command here to pull logs and get them ready for VMware support. All of this will be available to everyone later, so we don't have to try and memorize all that. So if you've got actually open a ticket with, yes?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. You're going to ask about it? So when you open a ticket with VMware support, it's not required, but I found it useful to have the logs ready to go. Because you're going to open, you're going to call, and you're at the mercy of VMware or GSS at that point, and it's not great. I don't like it. It's of all the vendors I've worked with, their support is just not the best. Because you're going to open the ticket, they're going to throw it in their queue, and then they're going to get back to you based on the SLA most of the time. So yeah, you want to pull your logs, get it ready, and also detail as much as you can the troubleshooting you've done, because the first thing they're going to do is that tier 1 engineer is going to go through the very basic crack environment. No matter if as long as it's on the ticket and they understand you've done it, you've given them like reasonable, I tried this, and this changed, or this did not change. Give them good details, because otherwise they're just going to go through it all again. And then you're going to get that tier 1 engineer for about an hour, and then they're going to say they have to escalate. The problem when it starts getting escalated is your SLA kind of goes out the window. It shouldn't, but I've seen it happen more times than I care to. So when it starts to get escalated, you might have to stay on to get some responses, or if they send it to engineering, there is 0 SLA. So if it goes that high, they keep making no guarantees on how long they'll get back to you. So if you've got something that's down, tier 1 down, and they still can't fix it, and they go on and bring in engineering, you might want to start looking at it.
If possible, reach out to a Presidio engineer if you have that ability before reaching out to VMware support. Well, the Presidio engineer will probably solve your problem far faster than a VMware support call. Would only do VMware support when Presidio engineers are released stuff.
Is
It's pretty rare.
In the VMware world, is engineering the developers that are in the business unit of that product?
I don't contacted the vCenter or vSphere client.
Start the management agents.
Restart management.
You already have that. And that's restart your management agents. They get harassed, right? For a gift card. Okay, so a couple of quick recommendations. vRealize login site, I touched on this earlier. This is now included with their vCenter licensing. So this used to be a paid product, now it's free if they have a vCenter server. They can use it on 25 items. This is the product I use to find, within 5 minutes of installing it, the problem with their host that had been bugging them for 6 months. When I was at, we set this up, you're like, you're paying for it, let's use it. So if you're out there at a client, just trying to see what, if they got anything going on, or just ways we can improve or help them, throw out this idea. There's no extra cost, just a few hours of time. So if they've got an open ad hoc or something, or just sell them on. We can do a health assessment, we can get this installed as part of it. It's relatively easy.
556065.
Yeah. And then VCheck reports. So this is an open source tool, it's PowerShell script based, and it runs a bunch of little commandlets that go out and it checks 160 plus different things in your vSphere environment. What I love is it looks for those things like those phantom snapshots, it pulls all of the alarms, warnings, etc. You can set it up as an email or a scheduled task to kick off an email every day. My previous employer, we did monitoring of data centers for all of our clients that had the contracted agreement with us. If they had vCenter, if they had vCheck, it would send me an email every day. My first half an hour of the day was reading through the health of everybody's data centers. Super cool. Again, cost is free, just a few hours to get it set up, some tweaking, and it can be crazy useful, especially if they've got, I like to say, if you don't have a ton of employees in the VMware realm, or if you're kind of newer, it gives you good information to see, and then, okay, well, I need to address this, it's being called out. And then,
Wasn't that the tool you used?
yes.
It also helped you figure out, which VMs were under provision as far as CPU resources.
Yes, so, well, actually, that was also vRealize Ops Manager. You let that one run for a while, and that actually pulls health and information and whatnot. And that gives you a statistical over time, over period. And any more questions? Otherwise, this slide deck and all sorts of links and information for everything I've talked about, your mind will be blown away with all the information I've compiled. I'll put a blog post up on ExploreVM maybe tonight, probably tomorrow, and reach out to me if you have any questions.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. There'll be more ExploreVM Live podcasts coming this summer from the Nutanix Next conference, VMworld 2017, and various vMUG meetings. If you'd like to sign up to be a guest on an episode, live or standard, reach out to me on Twitter @ExploreVM, Facebook.com/ExploreVM, or email me, paul@ExploreVM.com. Once again, thank you for listening.